Okay, thank you very much, Mauro, for the introduction. So we're in the field of data privacy. And like in the subtopic, let's say, of privacy communication, meaning organizations and companies talking to us and telling us what they're about to do. And I'm gonna like show you or introduce you to our very let's say, exploratory paper in this area. So we wanted to know what kind of difference does context make in the relevance of privacy information, and therefore we ask some users. Okay, so you're all probably aware or maybe even unaware of privacy notices that we all, let's say, see on a daily basis and we don't read, and they are still pretty common in the field because of like compliance reasons and other reasons. So this is still the main, let's say, tool to talk about privacy practices. They are often long, they are very seldom read. So a recent proposal suggests to make them more relevant. There have been many approaches to make privacy notices more relevant, for example, icons. But this recent proposal focuses on putting short, just-in-time notices in the transaction context of the user. So let's imagine you have some kind of app and you have to enter your name or your email address, and then a very short, tiny notice, a piece of information will pop up telling you like that your email address is not shared with third parties. So that would be an example of this kind of short and relevant just-in-time notices, which are complementary in a way to these long, legally required privacy notices. And nowadays, many companies start make use of this kind of just-in-time notices or short notices. For example, you probably have seen in WhatsApp when you start a new chat with somebody that your communication is encrypted. If you have installed Apple Pay on your device, there's a short notice saying where your credit data is transferred to. You're all aware of these cookie banners. And we can discuss whether these make sense in a way, but it's, let's say, it's an attempt of making privacy communication more contextual, and that's basically the area that we did our research in. We, let's say, took a pretty naive approach. We said, okay, in order to find out what is contextually relevant for the user from all these, let's say, broad like privacy policies, we thought, okay, let's ask them first. Let's really do the naive approach of asking users what they consider relevant. And we have like basically two main research questions. One is how concerned are consumers regarding their privacy, and what are privacy information preferences in a particular context. So concerns on the one hand and privacy information preferences on the other hand. And is there a contextual difference? So does it make any difference when I'm confronted with different contexts? That are our two main questions. So what we did was basically selecting two contexts, and we selected one context, which is loyalty cards that you, for example, use when you go to a store and show in order to collect bonus points. And the second context is fitness tracking, and we basically recruited people from a panel. We displayed to one set the loyalty card context and explained them. Just imagine you are using loyalty cards, and we introduced to the second set of people this fitness tracking context and told them, okay, imagine you're using fitness trackers, and afterwards we simply asked them, what are your privacy concerns in this context, and what are your privacy information preferences? So what kind of privacy information would you consider as relevant? Okay, the first is privacy concerns. We use a standardized scale, the concerns for information privacy instrument. And on the left-hand side, you can see the outcomes of the loyalty card concern. On the right, the fitness tracking concern. Let's say 4 is more or less some neutral concern level. Everything above means you're concerned somehow in a way. And what you can see is that on this, like, let's say, high abstraction level, the concern pattern is very much the same. You can see significant differences with small effect sizes, for example, for error concern and collections concern. But for example, when it comes to secondary use, which means like using your data for like other topics or giving your data to a third party, it's pretty much the same concern level in both contexts. Okay, we then ask the users for their privacy information preferences. So what kind of privacy information would you consider relevant? We used categories based on the GDPR of the EU and their guidelines. They distinguish between different kinds of information categories, like, for example, personal rights information. You have the right to opt out, information on processing purposes, information on, for example, how long is your data stored, like storage period. And we also translated these kind of categories like in a more simple language, so that people were able to understand what kind of information these were. And then we ask again, like, what do you consider relevant here? And what you can see here is basically that the effects are like very small again. So neutral is somehow in the middle. To the right, you see I consider this kind of information relevant, and I had to add some like small bars so that you can see where significant differences actually are. Meaning that, for example, people would consider information on their personal rights in this context more relevant than, for example, the contact name of the data privacy officer that is like just at the bottom. Just a side note, if you look at many privacy notices today, the name of the contact data privacy officer is sometimes at the top. So they in the field, it's currently considered like being important. Again, these are only like minor differences, very small effects between these two contexts. Okay, let's conclude. Regarding the concerns, privacy concerns, we found something called a hierarchy of concerns, which has been discussed in the literature before. And we also found something like let's say, small hierarchy of information preferences. The differences are like just of a minor type. We generally have very small effect sizes. And that also brings us to the main limitations of our study. So this was let's say, first approach to ask the user for their privacy communication preferences. And we started on a very high abstraction level. So we said, like, imagine this using the card. We had like very abstract, let's say, concern categories and very abstract information categories. So we were on a very high and abstract level. Regarding these two contexts, you can say you should probably address secondary use and improper access concerns over errors and collection. And regarding the privacy information preferences, you should probably focus on the personal right and less, for example, on the contact information of your data privacy officer. Further research, next idea would be to look at a context in much more detail. Let's say, an example, an app with specific screens, and asking people again what information is relevant now, and also taking a very concrete privacy policy of a company. My students did this already with the privacy policy of Twint, and asked the users, for example, is data sharing with Google Analytics okay for you or not? How relevant is this information? And the second like topic for research in this area is like testing the actual relevance with an experimental design. Thank you very much for your attention.
going to clap the hands for everybody. Thank you very much, Nico, for this great presentation. And while we wait like a few questions to populate, I like to start with a question from Alessio from the same session. Is asking how were the data collected? Was it the same user sample?
So it was like two different groups of users. So we recruited about 650. When I imagine, we split them into two groups, and one group got one context, and the other group got the second context.
Great. So I like to ask you like another question. I was particularly interested in the reasons why you involved non-users into the study. I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on the rationale for involving non-users into the sampling.
So our idea was that probably non-users might have different concerns, meaning that the reason for not using like a loyalty card or a fitness tracker could be because of a specific concern. So we hoped, or that was the basic idea, to see a different pattern, but in the end also the pattern was very similar between users and non-users.
Okay. So you didn't see any difference between these two groups of users?
If I have time, I can just go to the backup slide and show.
Of course, you have like around like 10 seconds. But
okay, 10 seconds. Let's.
I think it's a lot. I mean, if
Okay, just have a look. There is a difference, for example, when it comes to collection concerns between users and non-users in the loyalty card context. But again, it's not a totally different pattern.
I see. Okay, thank you very much, Nico, for this presentation. Thanks a lot. I'd like to move to the second presenter of the session. And so